Good evening. My name is Charlotte Potter Kasich. I'm the interim director here at the Barrie Art Museum. The Barrie Art Museum is located on the old Dominion University campus in Norfolk, Virginia, in the United States of America. We were founded by art collectors Richard and Carolyn Barrie in 2016, and we opened our doors to the public in November of 2018. Our permanent collection has strong holdings in contemporary glass, American modernist paintings, marine paintings, and historic dolls and automatons. Some of our upcoming programming includes Orchids, Attraction and Deception. This changing exhibition opens February 4th and runs through August 1st. The exhibition will present works of art relating to the virtual allure, ecological fascination, and cultural impact of orchids. Scheduled to coincide with the bloom cycle of orchids at the Kaplan Conservatory, the exhibition will include public programming in partnership with the Conservatory, the Norfolk Botanical Gardens, and the Barrie Art Museum. Our current exhibition is by abstract painter Joan Thorne. It is open February 4th through January 3rd, 2021. We're going to have a virtual exhibition closing. We hope you can join us. It's free and open to the public, Saturday, December 19th at 1 p.m. It's this virtual studio coffee and conversation with Joan Thorne, which is going to be fascinating, in which she starts to show us some of the canvases she's been working on in her private Soho studio in New York City. I want to talk a little bit about some of our other free virtual programming that you can enjoy at the Barrie Art Museum. We do art-inspired yoga. In this 30-minute yoga class, you'll be led through a series of poses inspired by the Barrie Art Museum's collection. It's released via YouTube every other week on Wednesdays. Our next lecturer after this evening's is an incredible artist named Devin Troy Strother. This free virtual fall lecture series features artists from our collections, and you're going to get to hear from a range of makers and see behind the scenes conversations that bring you around the globe, like this evening to the UK, and directly into the artist's mind to discover the ideas and process that drive their work. We hope you'll join us for the next one after tonight on Thursday, December 3rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So this evening, we're bringing you Luke Jerram, Exploring the Edges of Perception. Luke Jerram's multidisciplinary practice involves the creation of sculptures, installations, and live art projects. Living in the UK, but working internationally since 1997, Jerram has created a number of extraordinary art projects, which have excited and inspired people around the world. He's now known globally for his innovative art practice and large-scale public artworks, some of which you'll see this evening. With many of his artworks in the permanent collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and the Wellcome Collection in London, he also tours his art installations to art festivals and museums. In 2019 alone, he had 117 exhibitions in 22 different countries. Over the course of this talk, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I give you Luke Jerram.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Can everyone see me? It's very funny not having any feedback at all, but I presume you're all there and you can hear me okay. Shall we have the first slide? There we go. Well, firstly, I should say that I'm talking from Bristol in England, and we've just entered our second lockdown. It's been really interesting watching the election results coming in across America. It is fascinating. I'm not feeling very well today. In fact, I've not been feeling very well for the last few days, really. Yesterday, I went for my COVID test to see just how unwell I am, and I've not had the results yet. So I'm really hoping I've not got COVID, but there's no guarantee. At the moment, it's 11 o'clock in the evening in Bristol, in the UK. So I'm feeling a little worse for wear, but I'm going to give this my best shot. It's great to be here. My art practice is very sort of collaborative, I'd say, and innovative as well. I'm sort of often coming up with ideas. Some of the art projects I make are really large scale, and some of them are very small. So what you're looking at here in front of you is a photograph of the wedding ring I made for my wife. And it's got my voice etched onto the outside of it. And you can play it back on this miniature record player. And this is how I proposed to my wife, with this special talking ring. And it plays my proposal, 23-second long message. And it plays back. And I think, yeah, I proposed to her in a hot air balloon flying over Bristol. And luckily she said yes, which was just as well, as we were already living together and had a child by then anyway. But yeah, so there's a lot of sort of innovation, playfulness, I suppose, in it. And I have a lot of fun, I think. But I like to think that through collaboration, anything's possible. And so I'm often working with glassblowers, or with engineers, or with composers, or hot air balloon manufacturers, you know, but that's generally how every object around us is made. It's made by lots of people working together to help make things happen. Let's have the next slide. There we go. So yeah, I've been working as an artist now for about 23 years, and some of the artwork I make goes into galleries, and some of it goes out and is presented in cities. And I studied sculpture at art college, and also time-based, sort of performance-based artwork. And I often found that people on stage, you know, I go to see a performance, and there'd be someone doing an interesting performance, but I was thinking actually they're probably having the most interesting time compared to us in the audience who are just sort of watching this sort of passively. So back then I realized, well, could I sort of switch that? And so that's one of the reasons why this artwork, Street Pianos, this project came about. And it's called Play Me, I'm Yours, and it involves installing pianos in cities for people to play. And this is a photograph I took of a piano we installed in New York City, and it was one of 60 we put across the city for anyone to sit down and play. And the pianos act as this sort of blank canvas for the public's creativity. And they very much put the public at the heart of the experience. And it's been lovely, actually. I've installed now something like 2,000 pianos in about 65 cities around the world. And now you just see pianos in train stations and airports all around the world. And so the idea has sort of become part of culture. But when I first started, you needed a music license in the UK to put a piano on the street. And the local MP was incensed, and it was then raised in the House of Lords. And they were able to sort of help change the law as a consequence of this art project. So now in the UK, you don't need a license to put a piano in the street or sing in a pub or anything like that. So that's a positive thing. So art can have this huge impact. And I quite like putting an artwork in the public domain, because you can reach thousands and thousands of people. And it can change people's lives. We've had people who've met for the first time over a piano, and they've fallen in love and got married as a consequence. We've had homeless people who've been given jobs playing pianos in bars because they were discovered. Other musicians discovered and being given recording contracts. So it's this wonderful, wonderful thing. It's probably an artwork I'm most proud of, really. Let's have the next slide. Yeah, there we go. Let's see if we can play a bit of this film. You get a sense of it.
Well, this gon' change on me. Yes, history. The 1 and 2 came crumbling down. We act as if they're still around. I move ahead, forget about the images inside our head. Can we wake the day and live that? tear us down. I don't know how we're gonna turn this game around. Rubba-dee-bee, bow, 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 yeah, bow, bow, that'll go, yeah.
There we go. We have the next slide. If that's possible. Oh, there we go. Brilliant. So yeah, I learned a lot from the Street Piano project. And I learned, yeah, that actually it was the public that was sort of part of the artwork. And I had this crazy notion. I used to have an office. This is in Bristol, where I live, on a steep street called Park Street. And I had an office halfway up on the hill. And I thought, in the middle of a heat wave, you know, wouldn't it be nice to be able to sort of get on a water slide to get home every day? And I put this proposal, I put a bad Photoshop mock-up together. I sent it off to the city council and said, look, I've got this slightly bonkers idea. Why don't we close the street? And then they phoned me up and said, you know, there is something in this. And they allowed me to do tests, and they all turned up in a park, and we did a test on a hill that was the same slope, and they're all there with their clipboards and their high-vis jackets measuring our speed. And I set this up as a free event for the public to participate. But I realized there was only about 500 slots basically to go on this water slide. And we had, yeah, thousands of applications from all around the world, as far as Abu Dhabi, wanting to go on this giant water slide. But for me, this was about sort of questioning the ownership of a street and asking questions of the city. I think we're living in these cities, and it's up to us to sort of push their limits, to think about what a city is for, think about who they're for. You know, can we take ownership of the streets? I think you'll watch the next film and you'll get a sense of it.
Hi, my name is Luke Jerram, and I'm the artist behind Waterslide.
Now, I've known Luke for a long time, and I've always admired his way of using art as a way of bringing places alive. The publicity it's got for the city across the world is wonderful, but the real point, I think, is the way it makes people see the city in a new light. Nobody will be able to come down Park Street again without thinking it's not just a place for cars, it's a place for people to enjoy themselves.
We had 96,000 people apply to try and go on this slide, and then out of that sort of electronic hat we pulled 360 names. The tickets almost became like kind of Willy Wonka tickets.
So it was a really good idea because it's great for community spirit in Bristol for artists, and just a great event.
Yeah, and it's a lovely day for it as well. Loads of crowds of people supporting it.
I couldn't believe it at first. I thought it was just a bit of a joke, and then then I got the actual ticket through, and I was really surprised.
I got the ticket. It was like showing Chocolate Factory.
Maybe we could just stop it there. There we go. So yeah, it's an interesting project. I didn't want to. I funded this through kind of crowdfunding, and all of a sudden I had these sort of sponsors phoning me up, wanting to put logos on everything. So there was Red Bull, and who said that, you know, could they sponsor it? They'd pay for everything. And I said, well, you know, I don't really want to be selling, you know, toxic fizzy drinks to people. It's not really in the spirit of the project, really. There was Speedos, you know, they'd sell sort of water, sort of swimming shorts, Speedos company. Could you get everyone wearing Speedos and we'll pay for everything? And I, no, not really. There was even a kind of sewage and drainage company who phoned up and they wanted to pay for everything as well. And I just, no. So in the end, it was paid for really by the public putting in, you know, £1 or £2 to pay for it. And I paid for everything inside the barrier, and the city council paid for everything on the outside, the policing and the toilets. And we ended up with like 500 news stories right around the world. And it reached about 1 billion people. And then since then, kind of commercial slide companies suddenly started emerging, selling tickets to slide. So there's a couple of companies, I think in America, Australia and Europe as well, sort of selling tickets to slide on the big inflatable slides that go down cities, city streets. So it's sort of become a thing. And in the end, I created a DIY pack to allow cities to create their own water slides, and we raised quite a lot of money for a charity, a water charity. So that's the journey of that. Let's have the next slide, please. Ah, there we are. So I forgot to say that actually, as an artist, a lot of the artwork I make is time-based and sculptural, but I tend to avoid playing around with color because I'm colorblind. So I'm sort of red-green colorblind. It means all my paintings are a bit crap. I remember doing paintings at art college, and I was, you know, asked to do sort of figurative paintings, and I'd end up using too much green because I couldn't really see the color. And you end up with these sort of morgue-like figures. Everyone looked really dead. So I generally avoided painting. But that my color blindness has given me an interest in visual perception and thinking about our senses as sort of filters to the world, really. And I'm also interested in science. I studied physics and maths at school and had a place at university to do engineering, but then I decided to do an art degree instead. I thought that would be more fun somehow. But a lot of the artwork I make is still involves sort of exploring the edges of the senses and thinking about science communication. Now, all the images you're seeing in front of you, these are images of HIV, and they're represented in different ways by different scientists and science communicators. But actually, I've found that viruses don't really have color at all because they're smaller than the wavelength of light itself. So I think back in 2004, I created a first sort of replica of a glass HIV sculpture, which was about the size of a cricket ball. And at the time, I had a meeting with the guy at the Wellcome Trust, which is a sort of medical institution, and they said, look, we're building a museum in London, and we'd really like to have your HIV sculpture for this, for our collection. And how much would you like for it? And I said, well, I paid the Glassblower about £150 for this experiment, really. So if you were to have it, I'd be really grateful, and it would be lovely to have it. And the curator said, go away and come back with a sensible offer, which meant that you need to charge properly. So I spoke with a friend of mine. He said, well, you should probably sell it for about £2,000. And so I did, and I thought, oh, this is a good thing. I should make more of these. And it's burned into this giant body of work. Let's have the next slide. Yeah, so this is a HIV. This is a slightly larger, newer version. And I work with virologists to make these artworks happen, and also just to check their accuracy, and then also a team of glassblowers, and they have their signature on them and I have my signature. And they're now in sort of glass museums around the world. But also what's interesting is the imagery for these artworks have become part of the language of virology. So they get used in medical books and textbooks, and in sort of science presentations and things like that. So it's interesting. I think with a good artwork, you're never entirely sure what the outcome will be until you've done it. And it's all, that's what I really like with some of these projects, is that you end up with these really unexpected outcomes. And that's quite exciting for me as an artist, whether it's sort of people getting married or these artworks getting used for educational purposes. It's really strange. I'm presuming that many people watching this presentation will be interested in the history of glass and glass making. So this is made in borosilicate glass with lamp work. And in some ways, there's a sort of, there's a lineage relating back to the sort of Blaschka brothers. The Blaschkas made these amazing lamp work glass sculptures of undersea creatures, of sort of anemones and unusual jellyfish and things like that, which a lot of them at the time were sort of created before plastic was invented, so, but also incredibly intricate, but they were created to help represent things that were right on the edge of knowledge. So fishermen were dredging up these sort of floppy animals and sending them off, and the Blaschka brothers were making them in glass to show what they would look like in reality, almost like three-dimensional botanical paintings. And actually these virus sculptures are the same. I'm visualizing something that's on the edge of perception, because with an electron microscope, viruses are these grainy little images. And it's really hard to see because viruses are incredibly small. They're smaller than the wavelength of light, so you can't look at them through an ordinary microscope. You have to look at them through an electron microscope, and then you jump through to sort of chemical modeling as well. So actually creating glass virus sculptures like this is quite useful. Let's have the next slide. Oh yeah, and so there's quite a large body of work. And the Barry Museum have just acquired a COVID sculpture, which is rather apt, especially as I've just potentially gone down with it. The COVID sculpture was originally commissioned by Duke University to represent their research, and it was commissioned in January this year, just when the virus had been discovered in Wuhan. So that's why it was initially made. And now we've created an edition of 5, and they're raising money for Médecins Sans Frontières, who are doing work dealing with the outbreak and the pandemic in countries where they don't have a national health service. Let's have the next slide. Oh yeah, let's play this film, that'd be nice. I'm gonna go and get some water. I'll be back in a bit. So yeah, the artworks are made as accurate as they can be, really, within the limitations of glass blowing. Yeah, let's have the next slide. Oh. Ah, there we go. Right then. So, yeah, about 15 years ago, I had this idea to make a replica moon. But back then, the data wasn't available and the printing technology hadn't been invented. So it took about 15 years to make. An opportunity came up to create this thing. And it all sort of came together. Well, actually, the first moon I made was this is what you're looking at is a balloon, basically, and on the outside of it is printed with high resolution NASA imagery, and then it's internally illuminated. But what's amazing about it is it looks real. So when people see this moon for the first time, they often ask me if it's made of concrete or fiberglass. We toured it around India and someone thought it was made of paper mache, because it looks like it has this amazing texture. And it's 7 meters in diameter, what's that, 23 foot? Every centimeter represents about 1.5 miles, something like that. I've been touring this now for the last couple of years. I think we've had about 200 exhibitions of it in about 30 countries. It's gone a bit mad. But let's have the next slide. There we go. So it gets presented both inside and outside. It comes with a surround sound composition. And it acts as this installation artwork for people to enjoy, but it also acts as a venue. So there's events that often take place beneath it. So we might have choirs performing, or opera, or there might be a film night. There's an opportunity again for other people to be creative, and for me that's really important. And the artwork gets presented in different contexts. So if it's presented in a cathedral, then people think about it perhaps in relation to God and religion, whereas if it goes into a science museum, it gets read slightly differently. You know, if the artwork is in America, people might interpret it and think about it in relation to the Apollo moon landings, whereas if we take the moon to China, the moon has great significance in their culture in relation to the Mid-Autumn Festival. So the moon acts as this sort of cultural mirror to society, and it always has done. It's been interpreted as a god historically. It's a nighttime light source to allow people to navigate at night. It's used obviously as a calendar. So it has this different significance in different religions and different cultures, and that's one of the reasons I quite like. I'm interested in that culture, and I'm touring it about and revealing these stories. And the art project is called the Museum of the Moon. A little girl came up to me when she saw the moon, and she said, "Will you put it back afterwards?" So that was really nice. She thought I'd stolen the real moon. Should we have the next slide? There we are. I didn't see it. It looks like it has that texture. The next slide. Okay, let's play the film. It's a nice film.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
It's the middle of the day and it's a beautiful sunny day outside. But even though it's dark, kind of blue, it feels like nighttime. Got families lying down, just watching with their kids. It's a very different atmosphere to the outside world right now.
As I came in, my first reaction was, wow, absolutely wow. and then also the surroundings of the Great Hall, and to see the people all enjoying themselves and finding it interesting.
I didn't expect to see people laying on the floor, just chilling out, which is quite nice.
The idea behind the Museum of the Moon actually came from living in Bristol. Bristol's got the second highest tidal range in the whole of Europe. So there's a 13-metre gap between high tide and low tide, and it's the moon that's making that happen. The amazing thing about the moon is it acts as a cultural mirror. So every culture has different stories and mythologies and stories to tell about the moon.
The more you let your eyes just sit and focus on it, the more it looks real.
It was amazing.
You thought it was amazing, did you?
Yeah.
Why did you think it was so amazing?
Because there was aliens.
Because there were aliens?
And it was very exciting and a very uplifting visual experience.
It was really big.
Was it? What did you like about it?
It had lots of craters on.
Did it? And what did it feel like when you were underneath?
It felt like it was falling on us.
Did it? Did it really? I thought it was very peaceful and calming.
I think it's absolutely beautiful. I think it's got this incredible, there's such a simplicity to the idea, but it's got this amazing imposing nature, and it's just exquisitely delivered. I think it's a great piece.
It's the fact they've got the imagination going, it's fantastic, you know? It's really good.
I actually saw aliens.
You did see aliens, okay. She saw the aliens.
There we go. Should we get the next slide? There we go. So yeah, the moon. It's one of those projects. It's drawing huge audiences. I mean, that's the spooky thing. It's going into cathedrals. We had 83,000 people going to see it in Hull in 3 weeks. In Gloucester, we had 71,000 visitors in 3 weeks go to see it there. It's free for people to go and see, but these cathedrals, they still make £100,000 worth in donations. People are raking in. It was presented at the Natural History Museum in London for 6 months, and they had 2.1 million visitors to see the moon when it was there. So it's drawing these massive audiences, and I'm very aware that they're not going to see, the audiences aren't going to see an artwork by Luke Jerram. They're going to have their sort of close encounter with the moon, and that's fine. There's been sort of physicists who, astrophysicists, people who've studied the moon all their lives, and they come up to me in tears because they've had such a wonderful time and they need a hug. Which is really nice. Anyway, I've also made an Earth which slowly rotates, and that's been really nice to present that. But the interpretation is very different. People are thinking about it in relation to climate change, and thinking about it in relation to COVID recently as well. I'm very lucky actually as an artist that a lot of the artwork I'm making does go outside. So lots of exhibitions have been cancelled, but I've still had a few coming through. Let's have the next slide. This is an artwork made for Sky Arts Television. They wanted an artwork inspired by Brunelleschi's Dome in Florence. This was completed earlier this year, and it is a dome made of cedar wood and dichroic coated acrylic with a kind of mirrored floor, and you can walk through it. It's a very beautiful thing. I'm really pleased with it. If you go to the next slide, you can see what happens when you walk through it. You've got this lovely reflection. It's got a stainless steel floor, and at the top you can see there's a bell, and that's an extinction bell. So this rings every time there's an extinction of a species, which is, according to the United Nations, about 150 times a day we're losing a species around the world. So this artwork is a sort of it's sort of inspired by the stained glass and the geometry of cathedrals, but at the same time this is homage to nature really, rather than to God. So yeah, I'm hoping that I might make more artworks a bit like this, because it was quite a nice thing to put together. I quite like pushing the boundaries of what I think I'm able to do, and I like working collaboratively with people as well. So this was made for a television program for Sky Arts, and they filmed the entire thing, and I think it's being broadcast this month actually on Sky Arts television. Let's have the next film, next shot. Okay, well this is more recent work now, probably the last artwork I'll be talking about, and it's called In Memoriam. So it was during the lockdown here in the UK that I suddenly became aware that we're more and more appreciative of our green and clean air-filled spaces. So our parks and our beaches, they felt like kind of safe places. And I wanted to create an artwork that would act as a sort of a tribute to all the NHS, the National Health Service workers, but also act as a memorial for everyone we've lost. In the UK, we've had about 70,000 excess deaths so far as a consequence of this bloody pandemic. And all the funerals have been, you know, minimized. We've had churches and cathedrals closed. So I wanted to create a kind of temporary memorial artwork. And so this is an artwork all made of NHS bed sheets. Let's have the next slide. And so yeah, but from above it creates this sort of medical logo, and I'm presenting it in on beaches, but also in parks around the UK. Yeah, it's quite a nice thing actually, and again it acts as a sort of mirror to what people bring to it. You know, there's just been kids running between the flags, completely oblivious to its meaning, but it's also had quite a significant meaning to and a value for NHS workers. And so it acts as this installation, but also events have been taking place beneath it as well, sort of poetry readings and small classical concerts done in a kind of COVID safe way. I think there's people really missing live artworks and artworks. So actually having COVID safe installations that can be presented safely outdoors, that it seems to be, there's a need for that, and I'm quite happy to yeah, I'm quite pleased with this new artwork. Let's try the next film, next slide. So yeah, it was presented on the beach in Bournemouth on the south coast of England. It was very nice down there this summer. Let's have the next slide. Oh yeah, let's see if we can play this little film.
I felt quite emotional actually reading about the installation, and I did shed a little tear. I think it just for me brought back the feelings of when this all started, and also what everybody's been through, us as a nursing community and everybody as a wider public as well. So it was a little bit emotional, but actually it was lovely to walk through it and just feel part of it.
It was a nice opportunity to reflect on what's been happening around us in the last few months, and it felt quite peaceful. And certainly the fact that it's bed sheets was very significant. I hadn't appreciated that until I read the information on the notice board there, but it's quite poignant.
Sounds that it makes, I kind of think, oh, is it making that sound just because it's reflecting actually a bit eerie? And because it has been, when if you think about just this, when we went into lockdown, it was eerily silent, wasn't it? It was like, because I had to go to work, and it was my quickest journeys ever, because
there was nobody about, and it was just eerie and weird and strange. And in there, it was just, I just kind of wonder whether there's a little message that, yeah, this is strange, this is how this, and to me, that's kind of how it was sort of depicted.
You think in a different way probably than the rest of the population. So you're thinking of pandemic, you're thinking of illness, you're thinking of the care people should be taking. So you can't escape from your medical background. It controls your whole attitude towards health. In any way, one can make people appreciated for their work, because I think maybe in the past we haven't always appreciated them for their hours and what they've done.
I felt a bit lost in it, really. So looking round and then back up at it, it's huge scale. Just made me feel, little part of something.
Oh, there we go. So the next slide. There we go. So yeah, there's lots of other projects. I've been making artwork for many years. There are lots of art projects that I haven't talked about today. So I'll run through them quickly. Top left, you can see this artwork covered in tubes. This is an artwork that sings in the wind. It's a big 10-ton singing sculpture called Aeolus. Then in the middle, you've got this homeless figure called Invisible Homeless, and that's made of glass. It's sort of glass homeless figure that I toured. Then on the right, you've got a radiometer sculpture, so there's a hanging chandelier. Then middle left, you've got a what's that, 300-kilogram hanging glass sculpture made of rondels that represents a sound wave, a piece of music by Philip Glass. That was installed in a local art centre. An artwork for a school made in the middle. On the right-hand side, you've got poetry printed onto the landscape. This took place a month ago in Gloucester in 30 locations. We had poetry from the public in 30 locations across the city. Some umbrellas in Rotterdam for a weekend. Then you've got some abandoned fishing boats. A project called Withdrawn that acted as this venue for the capital of culture in the UK. And then on the far right, you've got a project called the Sky Orchestra, where we play music from hot air balloons to affect people's dreams in the early morning, as you do. Over to you. I think I've done enough talking. If there are any interesting questions, throw them at me, and I'll see what I can do to answer them. It's been nice to do this. It's fun.
Wow, Luke, thank you so much for taking the time to share your practice with all of us, especially when you're not feeling very well. It's really been remarkable that it's like midnight there and you're making it all happen and I got shivers a couple of times and I might've gotten a little teary once. So that's good.
That's good.
Even for an off night, So we have had some great questions happening, and I'd like to ask a few of them to you. One person said, "Did I see your moon at Burning Man?"
No, there was a moon at Burning Man many years ago, but it wasn't mine. I've seen that. I think I have seen it. I would like to go to Burning Man one day. I'll get there, but yeah, I've not had an artwork there yet.
Wonderful. There's still time. The next question is, who are the Glassblowers that you work with when you develop your microbiology series?
Yeah, they're up in the National Glass Centre in Sunderland. One of them just retired. Brian and Norman, basically, and they've just been given OBEs for their work in the arts. So yeah, I've been working with them for about 15 years, but also with other glass blowers as well, to different types of project, you know, depending on whether it's hot glass or cold glass, or borosilicate lamp work. So it's but yeah, it's been really good, and they've sort of said that it's only through working together that it's all been sort of possible, really. They'd have spent a lot of their time just making kind of glass boats in bottles and sort of Christmas baubles and that sort of thing. And I think by working together, I've helped keep their business going over the last sort of 10 years. And they're really proud that they've got, you know, their artworks in museums around the world as well. So they're great guys, but you know, they don't do email, they don't do mobile phones, you know, it's very much they've got 30 years of glass blowing skills that I just don't have any ability in. But what I have done, I've learned the methods and the processes and the limitations, and I do technical drawings, and then we do prototyping, and it worked out very well in terms of a sort of partnership between us. But I do this with a lot of the artworks I make. They're made in collaboration with people, and I'm having to learn the language of carpentry, or of engineering, or of glass blowing, or hot air balloon manufacturing. And I enjoy learning those processes and those methods. And it's through collaboration that anything's possible, and it keeps my practice interesting as well.
That's great. Maybe that's a nice segue into the next question, which is, what is the role of social activism in your work?
Ooh, social activism. Well, what I've found is that if you get it right, art has this real value. That putting just putting a piano on the street, there's a political act to that. It has a political value. You're claiming ownership of it, and you're saying, actually, the street can operate in this way, and that we can take a risk, you know, and actually by putting a piano, it's not going to get stolen, it's not going to get burnt. Actually, it can work. And that has a real value. It's a sort of demonstration that you can do things in the public domain, and it gives people confidence, and it changes the atmosphere of a street. But I'm also aware that it has political consequences. Public art is also political. So I presented the artwork in Paris, and the Minister of Culture turned up and said, welcome to, you know, I've come to launch the artwork. And she'd not been invited, but she was sort of coming to sort of bathe in the democracy of the art project. And it happens time and time again that mayors and politicians turn up to sort of have a bit of it, you know, and that's kind of what they do. So when I'm invited to present the artwork in Saudi Arabia, for instance, I decide, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give them that opportunity to make themselves look all democratic, when fundamentally they are chopping people's hands off down the road. So, you know, there's a value in these things. And likewise with the earth artwork that I'm touring, there's political messages there about climate change, that we're really in the shit when it comes to climate change, and we really need to change course really urgently if we're not going to just lose more and more species and, you know, ruin the lives of the next 30 generations of humans on the planet. But yeah, and then you're moving into politics, but right. That's important.
Right.
But I think as you get older, you realize you have a leverage. The art can just be a pretty thing on the wall, but actually there is an opportunity to do something that's important with it, and it can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a question from a student at ODU. It's lovely that your work revolves around people and getting the public involved. Do you ever create simply for yourself?
Well, I'm making all these artworks because they're artworks that I want to see. I'm interested to see what happens. And actually, you know, if you put a slide down the middle of the high street, the pleasure is in watching other people have fun. and watching what happens with that sort of public interaction. A lot of these artworks, they leave space for other people to be creative, but they become complete with the presence of the public, so that it would just be a strip of plastic and a bit of water if it wasn't for the architecture and the people on the street. So, but yeah, I'm sort of in the fortunate position now of actually choosing the artworks I want to make, and I turn projects down, I turn work down, and I just do the ones that I think are the most interesting and that could have the most, and you know, there's a sort of sense of, oh, this could have some really unexpected outcomes, and this is worth doing, whereas this is not worth doing. You know?
Right, totally. It does seem like collaboration is just a huge part of your practice. So this is interesting. What is one piece of advice you'd give an artist just establishing their practice? And what do you wish you could have known? This is from somebody who's also in the UK.
Well, it does take time. I graduated in '97, and it took about 3 to 5 years to learn how to make a living at it. They talk about you doing your, is it 10,000 hours you're supposed to do?
Right, to become a master.
Become, well, competent, I say. There's all the things that they don't teach you at art college, isn't there? You know, they don't tell you about marketing, they don't tell you about you know, risk taking. They don't, you know, dealing with failure is really important. I think learning how to fail successfully is really important. So a lot of the artworks I make, they usually fail for the first time. The first moon I made was helium filled, and it popped live on television. And that was not good. You know, but it's how you deal with failure is really important. You don't take it personally, but actually that's part of the development of any new product. You know, scientists fail most of the time, and engineers, you know, they have the luxury of making sort of 100 prototypes before they get to the final solution. Artists don't often have that opportunity to do 100 prototypes. So failure, being willing and able to fail repeatedly is really important. And that a lot of that comes with learning from failure, but also risk taking. I take measured risks. I'm quite risk averse, but you can measure a risk. You know, is anyone going to die as a consequence of this? What's, you know, am I going to lose my house, or, you know, what are the actual consequences? And most of the time, when you start thinking about it, you think, oh, actually, there's, you know, nothing can really go wrong, and so it's worth taking a punt. And my first commission was for £50, and then you sort of over deliver on that, and then your next commission could be 1,000. You over deliver on that, and that gradually over the years you get trusted to spend other people's money wisely, until you say, look, I just need £500,000, please, and they say no. But you get the sense of it anyway. But I could do a whole presentation on answering that particular question. It's a good question.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for your incredible questions. We'll do just a couple more because I know we're closing in on an hour, and Luke probably needs to go to sleep. A couple people are saying, not a question, but we really hope you feel better soon, and thank you for doing this. So that's come up a couple times.
It's getting quite hot, actually. I don't know why.
Yeah, there you go. So there's a couple people who've been asking about your senses. You know, everything about this lecture, maybe it's a good one to end on, is about, you know, at the edge of perception. And one person is saying, you mentioned being colorblind. How's this shaped your direction as an artist? You sort of touched on that. And another person's asking which of your senses is most influential in your art. So maybe, do you want to end a little bit on sensory experience, senses, and how you...
Yeah, well, there's an interesting set, there's a set of, I mean, I'm obviously interested in scale as well. So the viruses that I'm making, you're taking something that's too small and you're scaling them up to make them visible. And microscopes do that. And then on the opposite scale, you've got the moon, which you're shrinking down to bring into a cathedral or a space. So that again, you're shifting the sense of scale, and that's a sort of perceptual. But I'm interested in those sort of edges of perception. Our senses are just act as filters to the world, and they're very limited in what we're able to perceive. There's only certain sound frequencies that we can hear, and only certain frequencies of light that we can perceive. But there's all this other stuff which is mad, and technology is able to sort of extend our senses. So we're able to hear, you know, we can listen to bats by having a little meter that brings that frequency in, or we can use telescopes or microscopes to sort of extend our vision. And so I'm interested in all that sort of stuff because it gives you a sense of our perceptual limitations, I suppose. I've done lots of interesting experiments. So I spent 6 hours blindfolded on a mountain before. That was quite good. And you find over time that your sense of hearing becomes incredibly acute, and you know where you are because you become quite sensitive to touch. So your senses sort of recalibrate. And I've done lots of these sort of experiments over time, and I would recommend anyone who's an artist to go and carry them out themselves. Even there's these places called anechoic chambers where you can go and listen. Incredibly quiet spaces all covered in acoustic foam, and there's two sounds that you can hear, and one is your blood circulation in your ear, and the other is your sort of nervous system sort of singing away. And what's amazing is when you leave an anechoic chamber, you suddenly then become highly acute. Your hearing is suddenly retuned, and you can hear everything, and it's really difficult to have a conversation because you get distracted by the sound of a computer humming or the air conditioning. But yeah,
I listened to a podcast about how the sound of all of our electronics in our house strikes a minor key, like a horror movie, that we all just tune out at this point. But if you actually take like the sound of the water and the sound of the refrigerator, the sound of the computer, you put it all together, it's like, yeah. I mean, on my website, there's loads of projects that relate to perception that I've not talked about here. So last year I made a garden of optical illusions sculptures. They were sort of experiments for people to enjoy. My first artwork involved creating sculptures out of retinal after images. So lights would flash through a stencil and create imagery, which you'd build up and create three-dimensional sculptures with. So yeah, it's sort of an ongoing sort of fascination I've had with optics and perception over the decades. That's fascinating. Thank you so much, Luke. This is really...
It's a lot of fun.
This has been incredible. I really enjoyed it. I think I can speak for everybody that we've all truly enjoyed having this opportunity to get a little glimpse into your practice and your mind. I do want to mention quickly that the Barrie Art Museum is so honored, as you already sort of touched on, to have a COVID-19 sculpture now on view. So we encourage people to come. We are open to the public and you can see it. And I also need to just take a quick moment to pause and thank the Office of Community Engagement for helping us produce this series. You guys don't get to see, but behind the scenes, there's a team of people that helped create this production. They helped us right up until the last minute, making sure everything was smooth, and we want to make sure that we honor them. I just have a couple slides we'll go out on really quick. So please consider becoming a museum member if you enjoy our virtual free programs. Your membership allows us to sustain our free programs and exhibitions. We are open safely. It's a touchless experience. Our hours of operation are Tuesday through Friday, 11 to 5, and Saturday and Sunday, noon to 5. Face masks are required. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. It's been such an honor. We hope you'll come back and join us next month for Devon Troy Struthers, and have a wonderful evening.